Good evening. We are officially broadcasting, so we're going to start. So good evening to everybody attending this meeting tonight, committee members and also officers. First of all, I would like to let you know that in the event of a fire alarm, everyone should immediately leave the building through the nearest door and assemble in the car park in the clerical house. For those of you who would like to use free Wi-Fi, the password is success, goals, welcome, all lowercase. The first item of tonight's agenda, we have apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Jamie, Councillor Jamie Barry, and we have Councillor Carol Shelley, who is deputising. Thank you very much for that. And also we received apologies from Councillor Sean Wilson. Any other apologies for anybody? No? Thank you. The next item is declaration of interest. Would any councillors would like to raise any declarations of interest? Okay, Councillor Fernandez.
I work in GPS.
Thank you very much. You'll note it down. Councillor Colette-Grady.
I work for Oxford Health and Investment Interest.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for declaring your interest. This means we can move to the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 12th of June. Are members happy to agree the minutes as being accurate?
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you very much. We can move to the next item, which is public question time. We haven't received any written questions, and we have no members of the public. Which means we can start the official agenda. And the first item, we have Children's Services Progress Against Transformation Plan. So I'm going to hand over to Councillor Dixon and also to Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides an update on the for the committee on the progress against the Children's Improvement Plan and addresses the recommendations within the on-sale inspection which we had in July 2023. And it talks about the progress we've made to date, and the committee is recommended to review the progress within the implementation of the improvement plan, the current risks, proposed governance changes, and make any recommendations as appropriate. I won't go into detail into the report because I'm assuming everyone has read it, but just some of the headlines. We're looking at the workforce challenges in children's services, the key achievements that we've made, the vision and the improvements within children's services, recruitment of children's ambassador, and the corporate parenting advisory board revisions and changes that we've made there, early help work stream completion, missing children coordinator impact, staff induction and review, monitoring visit findings. That was recent monitoring visit, fourth visit that Ofsted made, which looked at the children we care for. Look at some of the performance improvements of children's services, the next steps that we intend to take, the governance and financial and legal implications. I think I'll leave it now and open it to questions, and Claire Diaz, as the corporate director, is here to assist as needed.
Thank you very much. I think brief introduction is great because then we can just focus on questioning and having discussion. So I'm going to open up the forum. Who would like to come first? So whilst I'm going to give a bit of headspace to committee members, I would like to start asking about your performance improvement plans. What I found quite confusing in the report was the areas where you have the performance improvement plan and also you have your BAU. And BAU is tracked through different governance mechanisms as opposed to your transformation plan. So at what point do you align? Because obviously action for one plan will have impact on the other plan. So if you could provide some clarification in that area, I think that would be good for the start.
So it's my understanding that all of the actions that are in the improvement plan at some point will become business as usual. So there's lots of activity around driving up the improvement of the recommendations of safety from the Ofsted inspection. But once you've done that, then they become business as usual. And there's already robust governance within children's services to just regularly monitor performance. So there's already a performance board in children's service, and as there always has been, that regularly monitors the performance. What this separate plan and board monitor are just your progression into improving those areas that are below their standard expected performance.
Yeah, so my understanding was that your performance impacts was made monthly. Was my understanding correct that the separate board on the reviews progress quarterly?
On the second, sorry.
Your separate improvement board only improves progress quarterly.
The improvement board, the DFE mandated, it's quarterly.
It's
Monthly.
It's every 2 months.
Oh, every 2 months, yes. 8 weeks.
So do you think there are any risks because these are monitored separately? Because I understand there will be business as usual, but still there will be differences between both action plans.
Yes. Yeah, and there's not so much an action plan associated with the performance board. It's just regular agreed standard targets, assessment timelines, financial services reviews. That's mandated by our statutory data set. So we're assessing ourselves all the time in that monthly performance board against those things. If there are individual things that need to be worked on within the service areas, that can go as part of the service plan, but it's not a specific action plan necessarily against the monthly performance, but there is very clearly an action plan against the mandated DFE mandate those timescales in terms of health and health needs.
Yeah, and my understanding from the report was that there was recommendation to strengthen the plan to make it smarter.
Yes. So we've just done that. There's been a full-scale review of the whole plan, and that was all of that work is played out and it's been really good, well received.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the report. I think there's a lot of good work in here, and I think a lot of very excellent work is going on in this transformation plan. I suppose a couple of things do concern me. Obviously, workforce challenges. We are, by the looks of it, still experiencing difficulty in actually recruiting to the social worker role. I don't think this is a new thing. I think it's been going on for some time. But obviously, this is hindering, I believe, our actual achievements because we don't simply have the number of people on the ground, as it were. And I suppose the second thing is the risk of slippage, that the 5 items that are listed there, including inconsistent practice, etc., the fact that those are unchanged, that does worry me. I would have liked to have seen some improvement against those and not the same things being listed again. And finally, not a sort of one, but on 311.4, we're talking about a range of new and revised policies and strategies. And you've mentioned some of them in here. I would have loved to see some of the detail of that. Personally, that would have been really helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Yes, staffing challenges are an issue and been an ongoing issue for a while. I think the challenge is that we have too many agency staff and we need to reduce the agency staff and have more permanent. Agency staff cost more and they're not always, they can move on and then take time off or whatever. And if you've got a permanent workforce, that traditionally they have more commitment to the work of the organisation. What we are doing is there's a number of things there. We do have our social work academy, and we're working to grow our own and develop our internal staff and bring those on as social workers. And we're recently developing a social work recruitment strategy, so we can look at specifically recruiting, having a more dedicated recruitment process for social workers as well. And as part of that, the HR team were looking at having a dedicated person that can help with the staff recruitment. We certainly recognise that we need to get more permanent staff in social work in that respect. Is there anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, we'll just say a renewed focus, I think, Councillor Elliott, on workforce. I think driven by the interim DCS, Catherine Driscoll and Fiona Seth. But the development of a social workforce strategy. So we have a workforce strategy, but it's a generic social care workforce strategy. So what Catherine is doing is developing a specific one for development and recruitment, how to attract, retain and develop social work specifically, and also using the delivery plan for that strategy to inform a bit of a refresh of the workforce board. So there's a workforce board that's been meeting in children's services for some time, but that strategy and the delivery plan has now provided a real focus for that board and what it needs to do. So the big piece around comms, big piece around how we are recruiting on that website, what does it look like, how are we getting outside into more job fairs, and then how do we compete with other local authorities? Bear in mind we're 12 miles down the road from a service, children's services outstanding in Wiltshire Council. We have to offer something different in that space. So there's a myriad of actions now coming out of that workforce board, all being driven by Catherine. And that will be taken over by the new DCS when they're in post.
What's your second question? I know what the third one was. It was 311.4.
It was the fact that the risk of slippage had the same 5 items there as previously, and there didn't seem to be there was much progress against those, which is good of concern, I suppose. I mean, they're obviously. I would say workforce challenges, that you just covered that, as it were. But I do worry about this low take-up of training, to get consistency. That is something that I would have thought. I know it's good, if you would have thought agency staff on board, they are not necessarily going to want to take up training. Whereas it would presumably be easier if we've got our own staff on board to mandate them to do training. But if we don't actually have some method of getting up to a higher standard, then we will have this inconsistency of practice and an application of thresholds.
Yeah, we over the last few months in July, we've gone back to basics and gone through a complete review of the service and looking at just the basic principles of putting children first, and certainly part of the approach to delivering training now. We're starting to make training mandatory, aren't we, and making sure that all staff do attend and that this discussion is given. So we're recognise that. There's some areas now that we really do need to focus on, and we're starting to make things like that mandatory as well. Moving on to your 3 and 4 about the certain strategies and policies that have been developed. Now, the corporate parenting strategy did come to Cabinet in March, and the action plan was presented there. And I think the sufficiency strategy has already been previously discussed here, but I could say about the corporate parenting strategy that we have got more of a buy-in across the senior management team. Councillor Chandler's involved. We have 4 working groups, the leader, the chief exec, and we're all involved now, and the cabinet member for housing. So I think we're getting to grips with the corporate parenting side of it. I'm thinking about children need procedures or management standards. That's more operational.
Yeah, well, we can certainly take away an action to just set out what policies and strategies have been developed and where they've been tabled before. And then if there's an interest in any particular one, perhaps we could have a deep dive into that area.
Thank you. I would just like to follow up a little bit on what Councillor earlier was saying. Because your training and recruitment seems to be an issue. So it's really positive to hear about your plans around refreshing workforce board and other areas mentioned. So with your plans making training mandatory, can you make it mandatory for the agency staff as well? Is that actually possible?
It's I would say the lack of appetite for training is more prevalent in our permanent staff than our interim staff. And some of the concerns and some of the inconsistencies in practice are also greater in our permanent staff than our interim staff. It's our interim staff who have the benefit of working in other local authorities who are good or outstanding, that are coming in here and working with us to help us understand in the new way that we are now our own practice standards. So, but what we are doing is we've made it much clearer about what the purpose of training is. Having lots of training for lots of different things hasn't proven helpful. So what we've done now is made a really clear vision, talked about some really clear values and the non-negotiables for our children, and then underpinned that with a practice framework. And the focus of the training is really on that practice framework, so much more focused training. The rollout of the kind of back to the basics training, we're no longer sat in a room waiting for people to come to us. We're going to people's team meetings and locking the door until that training is done. So it's just being approached in a different way. But all of our staff, interims and permanent staff, can be asked to do mandatory and are asked to do mandatory training. But it's not an interim staff issue. Our interim staff are holding us up in this space.
Yeah, that's really useful to know, because we discussed it and we thought it was the other way around, that it was actually the agency staff who was causing the issues, because agency staff they have a choice. So it's really surprising to me that it's actually the permanent staff, but then it's positive to hear that you acknowledge this and didn't transit it. So with the training, obviously back to basics, training is only part of the bigger picture. Are you also thinking about performance management mechanisms? How do they embed training in, just to make sure that it's really embedded in that service?
Yeah, I think essentially what's happened in the last sort of 6 months, and this is credited to the and Seth, before Catherine Driscoll and I came into post, is we've got a raising of the bar. We've acknowledged that the bar has not been high enough in terms of our expected standards of practice for children, and our application of thresholds and risk have not been focused enough. So that's what's happened essentially. So yes, the training is really, really important, but actually holding that bar at all aspects and across the whole service is far more important. Auditing to that bar, being really clear about what is expected. If you've worked in a local authority that's been inadequate for some time and grown up, if you like, in a local authority that's been inadequate for some time, then there is some sort of some bias around, some people believe they are better than they are. And some people do not know what good looks like because they haven't worked in outside of this local authority or other local authorities that have been good or outstanding. So what we're doing is making good practice stand out, celebrating good practice, sharing good practice, really taught as much as we can and helping staff understand what good looks like. Being really clear about where the spot on the wall is about what's good enough. Those non-negotiables for children, just reminding people constantly about what's expected of them. And then tasking our team managers, which is where we do have some performance issues, and are actively managing, to hold that bar with us. It can't just be held by fee. But it's there's a lot of work to do in children's services, and that's evident from our audits, which still show us a a fair cohort of our work is still inadequate. There's still a lot of work to do.
Do you have a time frame for when would you expect the impacts of these new training plans, new approach being embedded? At what point would you expect to kind of reaping the fruits, if you like me to say more?
Difficult question. We are already seeing some difference, and we are seeing, and every local authority, whether you're inadequate or outstanding, will have inadequate and outstanding practice. So we are seeing some, and we do have a lot of really good practice here in Swindon. We're going to be re-inspected towards the autumn of 2026. And that feels, I'd like that to be a bit further than it is currently, but I think that's realistically, it is, you know, it's a good year to 18 months. And most local authorities and most literature out there talks about a 2 to 3 year to get from inadequate to good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're, you know, although we were inspected in July 2023, we're not as far along that improvement journey as we'd like ourselves to be.
Because I think what would be really useful for the committee is to deep dive into workforce area, understand the plans and how you measure it, how these training plans are developing, are they successful, is there an area of improvement? So that's what I'm just trying to understand. At which point would it be appropriate for the committee to look into this a bit more further, because I understand you do need time for them to be rolled out and actually put into practice.
I would say, I mean, perhaps we've just had the risk assurance meeting today, haven't we, where we've talked with the leader and councillor Dixon and normally Sam when she's here, where we look through quite detail through that lens of performance, capacity and quality, and the performance of our audit. So we've got a baseline of where we are now. It would be really interesting in 6 months' time to have I mean, we'll be seeing it monthly, but we can certainly bring back another view of that in 6 months' time.
That would be useful. I'm sorry for taking over. Councillor Davies.
Thank you. Let's heard a little bit about recruitment, and obviously it sort of goes throughout the whole report, not just this section. I was going to ask about retention. How's that looking? Especially to the side.
And again, it's, you know, there's huge turnover in the local workforce, and perhaps not as much turnover as we might like in the permanent workforce, and that's our focus around performance management. So it's attracting and retaining the right people who are in the job to deliver the values we expect and to get it right for our children, as opposed to being here because it's local and it fits around the other things they want to do. So yeah, it's not significant. We don't have the access to the really nuanced data that we would like to have, and that's part of the new role that's coming in from the HR business partner will help us create a bit of a workforce dashboard so we can talk much more insightfully around what is happening in our staffing establishment, because it's quite difficult to see on a flat spreadsheet, which is what we currently have at all on. But we do hope to have a workforce dashboard that will help us see that.
Thanks. Do you have an idea of how far below establishment you are in terms of with agency staff, is the team fully staffed, or is there still a gap?
Still a gap, yes, we do have it. It was on the slide we looked at this afternoon, if you remember it, Councillor, but no, most of our roles are filled with, the vacancies are filled with interim staff, but there is a small cohort that's not, but we've got that data, I can easily share that by both number and also percentage, so we can get that on.
Okay, if I could follow up on a slightly different question. And the thing that jumped out to me was actually more positive, was 311.6 to do with special guardianship. That seems like a big sort of win thing in terms of going from 8 to 29. And what, just to understand the impact of that, what does that mean? Does that mean that fewer people need foster places?
A lot of foster and jump in if you think I'm not representing us. A lot of our foster placements will turn into special guardianship arrangements. So yes, that provides. It means that child doesn't formally come into care proceedings, but also has the right support that they need. It's a far more cost-effective way of supporting the child's needs and being in a children's home. And you would have to be.
Can you just sort of explain just what it is a bit?
special guardianship order is an order obtained by the court, and it's the older children and for family members, so kinship care, and also foster carers who have claimed children by fostering for them and want them to stay, to stop a child having a social worker for the rest of their life. We go to court with them and we get a special guardianship order. So it's the next best thing to adoption. And so the benefits are that the child won't have a social worker ongoingly, the child will be claimed, the child will have, the SGO carer will have the right to take the child away on holiday, to do everything other than change the child's name. And so there is a national increase and there's a local increase, and it means quite often, because most SGOs are family members, it means the child's identity is looked after and made sure that the child knows from where they came from, because they're living with their aunt and uncle and having lots of nice contact maybe on Saturday with their mum and dad. So it is a benefit, and it's a benefit here because we have a very good offer for family group conferencing, which at the early days in Mr. Goldsworthy's service, we want to absolutely look at family members very early on in the event of the child maybe not living with the parents. So we build a network around the child, and we look at families who may be able to phone at 6 o'clock in the evening, say have they had their dinner, or say, you know, if something happens, I can have them on a Saturday and a Sunday, all in the child's best interest. But just like it takes a village, sometimes you need a few people to raise a child.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then we're gonna thank you for the report, and we're gonna take away action about the report in 6 months' time on the workforce training plans, impact of them, and how you measure them. Thank you. So this means we can move to the next item, which is from your multi-agency safeguarding hub. And I'm gonna invite Councillor Nixon and PCS members to present the report.
Okay, thanks. Yes, so this report is to outline the triage of operational efficiency, the journey of children through the safeguarding process. The committee recommends no report, any conclusions, the action plan, and determine whether to make any recommendations. As discussed, it is about the front door and the multi-agency safeguarding hub. He is here, and David as the Goldsworthy as the manager of the front door and hub is here as well for any sort of technical questions on the delivery and operation.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. I'm going to open the debate. Any questions from the committee members? Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Jason. I think there's some work going on here again, and I noted that there have been significant increases in contact volume, and yet performance was strong. I think we can be congratulated on that because of those factors. Like in the previous topic, I note 325, 326, 328, that staffing is a big challenge here. And therefore you are stating there's a need for resilience. And I wondered if you enlighten us a little bit further as well. Do you think this is an ongoing issue or whether it can be resolved? On 326, we have an ongoing risk to embed and manage improvements. And 328, worryingly, there's an ongoing challenge to get the early identification of neglect where children have presented before. And I just want to you just elucidate on those, please. Thank you.
Yes, and if I may look at this in the rounds of your last item, the the workforce, there is a national shortage of social workers, there is a local shortage of social workers. However, this area of the front door is probably one of our most stable. It's the same workforce that we both walked into and is here in situ. As we have found children, and neglect is a feature in Swindon, domestic abuse is a feature in Swindon, substance misuse is a feature in Swindon, and so when we're looking at our training needs and we're looking at our work, especially at the front door, we're really centred on the learning from past children who we have had serious concerns about, that we have alerted Ofsted to, and they have been the feature in those, well, 3 of the 5 has been neglect. So we have a neglect toolkit, and it's one of Mr. Goldsworthy's tasks to absolutely make sure that that toolkit is used, as is the partners, because it is a partnership. And so we're centering on neglect and making sure that we have the evidence to then move the child and family through the system with a keen eye on neglect and how we're mitigating that neglect, because children, it's an area of risk to children that can sometimes be looked over because it's my idea of what a clean house is, maybe not yours, and so it can be missed. So we use this toolkit in order to evidence the harm that neglect can cause to a child. And neglect often goes with emotional abuse and other forms of abuse that may be prevalent in that family. So with the team that are in there at the moment, and we triage every single child that comes in, and you've seen that the performance is good, but our contacts are very high. Our contacts are the same percentage in Swindon than they are in Wiltshire. And we had our strategic group today, and I chair it, and I address that very notion that why are the police sending us the same amount of contacts that they do to Swindon with that huge population? And so they're doing a piece of work and they're reporting back, but it's absolutely clear that some of our tier 2 contacts that come in we're signposting to early help and universal services, which haven't been very well developed in Swindon yet. So they're still coming in through the front door, and we're working with other corporate colleagues and with the partnerships in order, and the Family First partnership programme to address the low level concerns that families have or partners have about children in the community, because they shouldn't come into a statutory place. Nobody wants a social worker to be assessing a family where the risks are low. The tier 3, which are the more concerning areas where children are at need, and then the tier 4 where it hits statutory services. So they are all coming through our front door, and our front door we're very pleased with. We've got the processes and the procedures and the policies in place, but we need the offer within the community to be developed more in order for us to calm the amount of contacts that are coming in that need to be looked at within a time scale, and then assessed, triaged, and moved into either early help and prevention or in statutory services. But we've got the processes in place, but we need to absolutely now build up the confidence of our partners, so they're not sending contacts through for a child who might look sad at school one day. That wouldn't, if there's a reason behind that and it's a risk or need, then we will address it. But we cannot have the amount of contacts that are coming in. We can't address them. We don't have the manpower, and nor should they be coming in. So it's a development. The workforce, you mentioned the workforce as well, and I have to say that I'm really, as Ms. Steele said, some of our permanent members of staff have I can only say hidden here in Swindon with the low challenge. We are challenging because children matter, and so we are losing some permanent members of staff. We're We're getting back some members of staff who have heard that through reputation that we're on it now, that we're ambitious, that we want the best for children, and we're welcoming back some first-class social workers who I chair the legal planning meetings, and they're presenting in a really effective way. So we, up and down the country, we know each other. It's that sort of sector, and our reputation is getting better, and that's what we want, and that will attract the right social workers to come to Swindon.
Do you have any follow-up questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCoy-Green?
It's just a quick one. I just wanted to echo what Councillor Elliott said around some of the really positive figures that you mentioned, because that's a really significant increase context being 200. Is that a pattern that you see, for example, we might see in CAMS year on year at this time of year? Is this a normal pattern you see in terms of increase, or is this completely anomalous?
No, everywhere in the country we have, July is a really tough month because it's the end of the school year, and educationalists want to pass on the information to us, always around before Christmas as well. There are peaks of contacts coming through. The amount are too many, and because we know that through our data, and we know that we translate some into referrals, but a vast percentage we signpost out into the community. So we just need to work really well with partners in order to reduce the contact.
Thank you. Councillor Shelley?
Thank you very much for those explanations. That's just a quick one, really. You talked a couple of times about the offering the community for the lower level referrals that you'd like to see dealt with in a slightly different way. Could you just give me an idea of what that would look like and what you'd like to see?
So the Families First Partnership programme it's a DfE reform that is up and down the country, and some pathfinders are absolutely doing it early doors. We're not behind the curve, but we're making it absolutely Swindonised and making sure that we have the right offer out there in the community. We don't as yet, and the Family Information Service, which is a statutory function, I believe there was one in Swindon. There is one at the moment, but that we need to create that. So we have a project and a project lead, and I'm the named officer for this project. And we're building up the offer out there in the community, but it's not going to happen overnight. But prevention is better than cure, and we don't want to invite children into social care arena if they haven't had the right intervention early on. And I'm looking at children that, well, we were talking this morning about children that maybe have been in our midst in their early teens, that you just wonder, would they be with us if they'd had a very early support within the family. Some families need support for a long time. It's not a quick fix. Some families have lots of families surrounding them to support if there is a dependence on the substance, or if is mental health, and so they need that support. If that support isn't there, then is it right they come into a statutory space? I suggest not. I think we should have that early intervention support out in the community.
Thank you. Nigel?
Just about the contact ratio. In amber, you say you've got 69% contact ratio, in green, 82. Is amber greater risk than green? You've got a lower contact rate in amber than green. What is it?
When contacts come into children and families contacts in Swindon, we rank red and into red, amber, green and blue. So your red are your priorities, they're your child protection. Your ambers are likely to be an assessment, but we probably need more information. Your greens are what Bee's just been on about around the early intervention, early help. So the vast majority of the work that comes into children and families contacts sits at that green level. So it does take a lot more, but we have, so the reds are dealt with by social workers, as are the ambers. We have family workers that deal with the greens and the early help and intervention. And it takes them some time to get through, so that's sometimes why they are better, sometimes the figures are different. We really want to be at 85% across the board in getting in time scale or above. It does go up and down.
Is that staying the same report next year, year after, staying the same, Richard?
Well, we're aiming for higher. We're always aiming to improve and get better. And as we said, as we move into the Families First project, we should be able to look at a lot of the ones we rag red and green, not coming into us, not even coming into children and families contacts, so we're diverted early to early intervention, and that will then give us more time space to concentrate on the statutory work as we can't.
Councillor Shelley, Sarah Shelley.
Thank you. Just going back to the referrals, could you just clarify for me, in terms of too many referrals coming into you, is that to do with services, other services not being available, or is it also to do with people referring to you when they shouldn't be referring?
Probably both, and then the contacts. So the contacts are the front door contacts, but that's the high rate. So the contacts come in. There are some that, yes, we would suggest, having looked at them, shouldn't be coming in to the front door of a statutory service. It's a multi-agency safety hub, and so they shouldn't be coming in. And as we said before, in the invention of the Families First partnership programme, they won't. The referrals are those that have come in as contacts with the red, amber, green, blue, and the reds and the ambers will translate into a referral into the statutory service for a statutory assessment. So that 45-day assessment, where a social worker, only a social worker, working within the team around the child, the school, the health system, and so on, and the parents, maybe works if they have an adult social worker, if they have mental health, they will form a holistic assessment around the needs of the child within that family. So that's the referral.
So is there a need for education?
Yeah.
And are you doing that, and how are you doing that in terms of educating people about who they should be going to?
Yes. Well, we have a whole range of as you remember, you came to visit, didn't you? We have a whole range of colleagues who sit in children and families contacts, of which the MASH is an element of that. That's where we have a high rate triaging, really deep diving into a family. But the one of the tasks that Mr. Goldsworthy has is to go to all of the head teachers forums, to get out there, to go into the GP forums, to do some of the strategic work that his level would be doing, working with the community and talking about contacts, talking about the quality of contact. We have another colleague who works with Mr. Goldsworthy, Ms. Cartwright, who is working with health and education and all partners, CAMS, all the different health elements, with the police, with all of our partners, probation, housing, in order to look at what a good contact looks like. Because we want the good contact. We want to understand a child's journey in order to address their needs. We don't want, he looked sad at school today. We want, he looked sad at school. And there was a mark on his leg. And when we asked him about that mark, he said, "Oh, Daddy hit me on his way out." We want the depth of information in order to understand whether we walk into a child's life or not, through their family and their home. And that hits into the other area of the last conversation. The training that we're doing is very much based on our findings through audit, through our findings through some of the panels that we all chair, and we see that there's neglect is prevalent, so we put lots of training into, especially at the front door, but we do it with partners. And today I committed Ms. Cartwright to do some more partnership training. And I think we're being really flexible about that, because that is a partnership function, and she doesn't work for the partnership, but we're all part of the one system. But I do a gathering and I talk about the training, and I have Liz saying, can we have some? And we're not going to be ridiculous about how we want to keep children safe. So we're saying yes, and it's spreading. And I see that then when I supervise, when I run panels, I see that the penny is, if you like, is dropping, because social workers are saying, well, you know, we had that, didn't we, a month ago, and we had that with that child, and so I'm here today to talk about this child. And that's when you know there's learning in the system, and there's a keen eye on children.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Councillor Quigley?
Sorry, just to jump back again to the Amber contacts. So you said that 315 are completed within 24 hours, so there's like, what, 138 or something that aren't. How acutely outside of that 24-hour window, I mean, that just does have a bit of a message, like how acutely over the kind of margins of what you'd like to be making contact?
Mr. Goldsworth will answer, but they all know no one goes home if a child isn't being looked at. No one leaves the building until the child is looked at.
Nothing goes over the day. So we have 24 hours to undertake the screening for an amber contact, and it will just be 2, 3, 4 hours of that. So work does not anymore sit within the MASH for any length of time. Sometimes when you screen contact, you're waiting for school to give us to give us the school information back. You're waiting for help to give us the information back. Police to keep us information back. And if that doesn't come in time, then we have to make the decision whether we wait for that information or whether we've got enough information to make the decision. If we haven't got enough information to make the decision, we will go into time. We need to make the right decision for that child.
Is there a way of breaking that data down so that it kind of shows it a bit more in detail? So does that make sense?
Not in Care Director.
Yeah.
But we're moving to Liquid Logic at the end of November, and we will be able to capture it in Liquid Logic. I've asked for the data to be brought down time and time again, and it's just not possible. It will be in Liquid Logic.
Yes, I was like to.
No, I went to it. It's not.
Yeah, so once we've got Liquid Logic and that's all embedded, then that's something we could bring back at a future date once the new system is all settled and efficient.
Do you have any timescale?
And it's the date we go live is the 24th of November, so just after our next monitoring visit, which is on the front door, this very subject. In November, so we migrate. We started the migration, and there are a couple of days where the migration where everything closes down in Care Director, and Liquid Logic will be implemented, and the go live date is the 24th of November. So there's lots of training, there's lots of big candidates is running the program, and there's ongoing training. Luckily. Most of us have used Liquid Logic in other local authorities, and it's the best one. So there will be, I have faith that that the management of Liquid Logic will really help social work in Swindon it really well, because care director is a complex system that you have to go into lots of different hidden episodes in order to get a full picture of the child. Liquid logic is very clear.
That's good.
Perhaps we could attach something to a future report, depending on the subject.
I was actually thinking it would probably align nicely with the workforce, because that's training, and liquid logic will require training. Again, it's different type of training, more around technical skills. So I think it's nicely in that item, if there was something that could be included. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Fernandez?
What evidence is that the changes are leading to better lived experience and outcomes for children and families, and how is this being captured?
I can say yes, as we are. We can give assurance that through recent, for example, procedures in looking at children who are on child protection plans more than once, they are coming to legal planning, so we can have a comprehensive look at all areas of that child's life with a lawyer. The parents know we're doing this because we want to have zero tolerance for children living at risk. So we're working with our lawyers to review all of those children, and so that the outcomes are better for them. That doesn't mean we're entering into the public law outline process, which is pre-proceedings and care proceedings. It means that we are looking at their needs and addressing their needs without thrift and delay, and without an acceptance that you have a child protection plan more than once. No child should have a child protection plan. So we're very clear that we're doing everything we can to support the family to keep a child safe without being at risk of harm or actual harm.
Thank you. Thank you. I also have a couple of other questions, if you don't mind. So the last time we spoke, I believe it was in April, and so at that time, referrals were around 26%. So I was just wondering if there was any change in that number.
Which referral? Sorry, which referral?
Contacts.
Refers to the front door.
Or referrals. I'm sure the current figures is slightly less, around about 18%. But we've done a lot of work around repeat referrals. We've had an in-depth sample of our referrals that come into us, and all those that are no further actions, and we've got a report in respect of that. That just tell us that we have done the right thing by those children. There wasn't any children found to have the decision that was wrong. There's some actions that have come out of that audit that we're now closing the loop on and putting into practice. But it is the referrals is always an interesting one, because that's work that we've already managed and then closed down. So it's always something that we have a keen eye on and that we look at, and we regularly review, regularly look at those children that keep coming back time and time to make sure that we're doing the right thing by them.
Thank you. Would it be possible just to get a written response on the number?
Yeah, of course.
Because I appreciate you can't remember from the top of your head. I was just wondering if you kind of need direction of travel, but by the looks it seems that it's coming down.
Yeah, we did, about 2 months ago, we looked at the amount of contacts that were coming in, and there is an anomaly in the system, because sometimes they're counted twice or 3 times. When I had a child had 40 contacts, why did the child have 40 contacts? And when it was broken down by our data team, they said, no, this was 7. It was just a member of staff of Mr. Goldsworthy's had put it on as a contact, but so did education colleague and so that. So So in Care Director, I said, can't they be combined and collated into just one contact? No, they can't in this system, but they will be next. We'll hear that a lot in the next 2 months. But from the children that I found that I was given the data on with more than 3 contacts, I asked for them to be sent, and in fact they're sent to me every month now. But I got again Miss Cartwright to do a piece of work on looking at the first cohort of children who had more than 3 contacts that had been collated. 3 contacts. Why were they coming in and then coming in again? What were we either missing, or what was the ongoing need or risk to this child? Had they been involved with us? Had we done an assessment? Had we worked with them? Had we closed? And so that was done, and there is a paper on that we could look at to making sure that you had sight of it and learning from it, and that I was assured that they had to come in. There were the right contacts that came in. They looked at 3 anomalies, but in deep diving and auditing those 3 children, they were satisfied that they came in at the right time. That they had been, 2 of them had been families where domestic abuse was a feature, and we'd worked very hard with the family and the person who was harming, and also the victim, and they had sadly split up, but the victim found another person perpetrating another person who inflicts pain, and so it came back, and that is going to be life for some individuals. But then we work really hard with victim programs and how we make better choices and how we keep our children safe. Although as an adult you have a choice, but you have to keep the children safe. So I was satisfied, and I keep getting all of that. So so every 3 months I'm going to say, can you have another deep dive?
If you could share the report, I think that would be great. Then we can look through it. Another area of concern we touched base on in the last meeting was around homeschool children, because obviously there's lack of statutory agencies. So have you given any consideration to this area since our last meeting in April?
Children educated at home, and so there is now a list with education of children who are EHE. I give education the list of children who are on children in need or child protection plans, and they blend them to make on the system to make sure that children who have child in need plans and child protection plans are known to education, and in fact it's not encouraged that children are electrically home educated when they have a child protection plan. There's nothing in statute to say that they can't, but it's certainly not. It wouldn't be in a child protection plan that they were allowed to educate at home where there is risk of harm. We want children seen at school, so we have that system in place. There's quite a percentage of children in Swindon who are EHE, and I think probably nationally it has increased from what I hear, but it depends on it depends on the circumstance of the child. But I know that the education Jasmine will probably be able to talk to this as well, but I know they are absolutely endorsing children coming in school and being at school. Children that we care for are to be in school. Children on child protection we want at school, and children in need. So we certainly have now data that we can tell where children are and what status they have.
So obviously the children specifically that are on a plan are overseen by the virtual school head teacher, by Gemma, who's been to this board before and presented on that. But we have a statutory responsibility to ensure that we've got an oversight of those children, but an oversight of and are able to monitor
any child that's being home educated. The problem that we've got is that it isn't necessarily something that we would want to endorse for most children. So not just children that are coming or are known to us from within the system. And we aren't unfortunately funded to be able to have the capacity of a workforce to be able to oversee just how much monitoring that would take. We do it. We are confident that what we've got in place allows us the assurance that we need, but there is very specific support for children that are known to us that is outside of that process. We can bring in a report around educated children that are educated at home and do kind of a whole oversight so that you can understand what that looks like from a Swindon perspective. But it will be different from just focusing on children on children.
Thank you. It's just because this area keeps coming up, different areas, and homeschool children. So I'm open-minded to have a discussion with council next week. I'm also happy to hear from the rest of the committee how do they feel about this area. Councillor Davies?
But for me, I don't think it's a major concern. Like overall, I think there are, I wouldn't like to say that it was a concern because lots of people get good experiences from being educated at home, but obviously, there are definitely people that are aware, people who are aware of shouldn't be educated. I don't think we should extrapolate from that into the situation.
What our monitoring demonstrates is the quality of the educational provision that our children are getting. That's what I was saying around. There are a cohort of children that we would endorse because it's working really well for them, but that isn't necessarily a majority cohort. We would always encourage school first.
Thank you. So if it comes up again, that maybe we can look at it at a time. So it looks like there's no specific need to bring a separate report about it, and we can discuss with council. Okay. Any other questions for anybody? Good. So then we can close this item. Thank you very much to Fee and also Mr. Gosworth. Yeah, welcome to stay, but if you want to leave the meeting, thank you. Thank you. And we can move to our next item, which is Swindon Safeguarding Partnership, and we'll hand over to Councillor Vincent, Councillor Vaughan, and Claire.
So I think this was, sorry, Chair, I think this was the item that had been agreed with Hannah from the Swindon Safeguarding Partnership that we pulled from the agenda because the report hadn't been cleared by the ICB nor in the annual report. I did an email from Hannah Willis. I'm saying a W. I'm just using the Safeguarding Partnership.
We would have expected someone from the Safeguarding Partnership to actually present it, and there's no one yet. We can present it as a cabinet member, but we need the officer from the Safeguarding Partnership.
I'm sure we still can have a discussion because we received.
We can, I haven't gone through the report because it hasn't been cleared and it wasn't written by myself, but we can absolutely.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that you're taking on chairing, so it would be good to hear from you as the upcoming chair.
So I haven't got it in front of me to introduce it.
I should introduce it. One of us should introduce it. And all we can do is introduce it.
That's right. We are just members on the board. We are not.
Right.
What I would suggest is it would be good to hear your views of the Safeguarding Partnership as it stands at the moment, because we read the report and we had a discussion about it. But it would be useful to hear from yourself and then we can start our discussion.
Yeah, so don't have reports, and I've not read the report, but so I would imagine what the report set out is what is the Swindon Safeguarding Partnership, which is a joint arrangement of children's and adults. It's the strategic arm of safeguarding, so very different to what we've heard Fee talk about through the Safeguarding Children's Mash and the Adults Mash. This is the strategic arm. So the key safeguarding leads are the chief executives of the 3 statutory partners, so Sam, Mowbray for the council, and the chief exec from both Wiltshire Police and ICB. And they delegate their statutory duties down to the executive of the SSP, which is at the moment chair of that is Jill May, nurse from ICB, myself, and Liz Coles, who is the rep from Wiltshire Police. And what our job is to create and ensure that we discharge all the duties that are placed against children through working together, children's legislation surrounding safeguarding, working together 2023, and the Care Act 2014 from adults. We must assure ourselves as execs that those safeguarding duties are being discharged in the way that in the manner that they are expected to be as described in those pieces of statute. We do that by ensuring that we have a key strategic strategy in place for the partnership with clear priorities, with a clear business plan. There are statutory duties around the publication of an annual report and the processes of reviewing serious incidences from children's and adults and making decisions about whether things progress to safeguarding reviews both in children's and adults. The key bit, the real engine room, I think, of the executive is not the executive itself, is the delivery group that sits underneath it. And the people that come into that delivery group are the chairs of all the individual subgroups. You've probably got a picture on your paper that shows you that view of all the different subgroups. So there are 4 subgroups aligned to the 4 priorities in the partnership, which is neglect for children, self-neglect for adults, child sexual abuse for children, and all age exploitation of all age. So there's a subgroup that sits underneath all of those with a forward plan that is progressing the actions that we need to identify the areas we want to progress. And then there are subgroups around learning and development, subgroups around quality assurance, and subgroups around the practice review group, which looks at all of those specific child and adult safeguarding reviews. All of the chairs of those subgroups come up into delivery group to give an account how they are discharging all of the actions that are needed to make sure that we in the executive can be assured that the priorities are being delivered. Outside of that key governance, there are the quarterly partnership boards, which replaced for adults what were the old safeguarding adults boards. If anybody's had the pleasure of sitting on one of those, so they're now sort of more multi-agency partnership boards that happen in the community every quarter, which again is an assurance board holding us to account to make sure we're delivering on those priorities. We've got a really robust governance process within the partnership, and it's really robust multi-agency audit. So the business unit itself drives a lot of learning that then is taken back into both children and adults to say, help us respond to this and help us learn and understand and develop our plans. I'm hoping that's what that report told you. How did I do?
You did really well. Yeah, the report outlines the structure, but also we agreed that the report was quite worrying in terms of performance and progress. So just to give you a taste on neglect, it says multi-agency audits, the partnerships, last 3 local child safeguarding practice reviews and recent rapid reviews have evidence that we are not yet providing a robust enough response to children who are being neglected and are not identifying neglect at the earliest opportunity. And I could read through the report. So it was very worrying, and also not having the right officers to have the discussion. It's very worrying for us.
Well, in a way, I guess we just let those officers go, because actually this is a strategic business unit. So the actual work of that, of what's needed to make sure that people understand the thresholds for neglect and respond, that's back to us as services. So that's adults, children's, police, health. The role of the partnership is holding those individuals to account, making sure that we're doing the learning, that we have that information, and that we're setting those improvement plans with the agency. So it's the same conversation that we've had all night around where are we in our practice with children's services, and we know we are an inadequate children's service. So this is one of the the symptoms that come from that, is that we're missing child neglect, and we've had 3 serious incidents since May this year that have also shown us that we are missing child neglect at the earliest opportunity.
Yeah.
So the concern doesn't sit, if you like, with the partners. There'll be nobody in the partnership. They're doing what they need to do. The framework is there for them to identify that poor practice and to deliver it back to the service, but it's the service that needs change, the service that make the difference.
And just to add, this report from the Safeguarding Partnership was based on an annual report, so 24-25, and really this report should have been sort of talking to the MASH report, and sort of, because the two reflect, and so well, the questions around neglect have been sort of addressed in the previous discussion.
Can I just?
Well, there's still challenges, but yeah.
I was just going to add on to the neglect. It were a comment I was going to make earlier on in the room when we were talking about Farmers First Partnership and the methodology that we now need to roll out in terms of what Tier 1 and Tier 2 early help looks like for children and families. And in the case for change that was approved by Cabinet around our future operating model for Future Council 2028, in July, one of the things that is really clearly articulated in there is moving to a prevention-focused workforce. And some of the training that Finn was talking about rolling out earlier on with partners, we need to roll out with all facets of our organisation where they are front-facing staff, because we've all got to make a commitment that we are prevention first. We are identifying at the earliest opportunity. So it's not just about the partners that we're working with, it's about our grounds maintenance officers, it's about our refuse collectors, it's about our housing officers. So we've got to take a cross-organisational approach to doing this differently, and that is outlined in that report. And I feel like I have a confession to make here, because quite by accident, but acting on Sam's behalf last week, I was asked to sign off the report. So I had the report and I raised the same concerns in relation to the neglect group, the groups that have been working on this. But I was harmed by the recommendations that were in there that recognise that, but also took away from a council perspective that what we're proposing doing in our future model is absolutely what we need to do.
So when we discussed this in our pre-meeting, it felt like from the report there were just too many priorities where it was spreading thinly, and they weren't really getting grips with neither of those priorities. That was the sense of the report kind of came across. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, totally in accord with what you just said. In some respects, obviously, it feels unfair that now the people who were going to present the report that we make on, but I think in our discussions earlier, we were very concerned, I think. I mean, if you look at the strategic priorities, first of all, neglect, with 44% of children on child protections due to neglect, and it says not robust enough. If we look at self-neglect, it says evidence tells that underpinning guidance and frameworks not yet fully embedded. All age exploitation, not robust enough. Child sexual abuse, general lack of awareness and lack of coordinated approach. I think, it's full of words like challenges, struggling. If I was putting this in school report terms, I'd be saying B- could try harder. And I take what the chair said, there are a host of subgroups with myriad responsibilities. In life, I was always told that less is more. And I honestly think that this very worthy group need to be more realistic of what can be achieved and prioritise to be more effective.
So difficult because I've not read the report, and it wasn't cleared by the author, I guess, that either. So apologies back to you because I didn't know it even got to you, Kirsten. There are 4 priorities for the safeguarding plan, and they are driven by what we see is not working well in practice. So they're driven by the things, they're informed by the safeguarding adult reviews and the child safeguarding practice reviews. So, but there are only 4. There are 4 priorities. So the Swindon Safeguarding Partnership focuses all its activity, all its auditing, and all its training, of which there's lots, and all of its focus on those 4 priorities. So there are only 4 priorities for the safeguarding partnership.
I know this is a bit of a challenging discussion. Can I first suggest, because the way you take on chairing this group, would you maybe come back to us on safeguarding and provide your view of where we are and how you want to shape it going forward?
Yeah.
Just look at it holistically, because for us, that's the information we have, that worries us.
Yeah.
So if you could come back to us after you take on in October.
And what we're doing first in October is a wholesale review. So we've recruited an independent scrutineer to work alongside us, really challenge us as an executive and as a partnership to say, are we doing the right things? So that review sits as a bit of a reset, and that's why I agreed that I'll take up the chair after we've done that review, so that I can lead those improvements. But all of those things are true. We are still expecting, we would like better practice in all 4 of those priority areas. That's why they are the priority areas. And we are an inadequate children's service. So there is a continuation here on that theme, that we are not seeing practice where we want, good practice where we would like to. The role of the partnership is to shine the light on that, which it is doing. Services that will need to do things differently, and multi-agency services to get that.
So I'll say let's go to item and have a proper discussion when you bring it to. Thank you. Right. Thank you for that. So this leads us to the next item, which is public health nursing services, and we're going to, for a change, in our Councillor Grant. And we have Caroline Little and Emma Kane.
Thank you, Chair. This is a return visit on public health nursing services after the report. We were here in April and discussing the service, and the committee were minded to bring us back in 6 months or thereabouts to discuss 3 specific items which were around the service, which were work development, accessibility and systems impact. I suspect that since we've had a change in municipal year since then, not everyone on the committee was there back in April, and Caroline, who's written the report, has sensibly covered what the public health nursing services does. But I think that I'll hand over to Caroline in a moment to go through the report. I'll hand over now.
Thank you.
Would you like a brief overview?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. We have plenty of time.
Great, thank you. So as Councillor Grant outlined, we had a board report back in April, and this report looked at those 3 issues specifically. So in terms of workforce development, much like our social care colleagues have described, we also experience challenges around recruitment and retention, and that is in response to the national shortage of health visiting professionals. So some of the key areas we've invested in over prior years to try and address that have been around a heavy investment in practice education, and this has really made a fundamental difference. So making sure that we have good support for our newly qualified staff, and particularly for our more junior workforce, in being able to carry out their roles. A grow our own model, again, as described earlier, so very much upskilling our current staff and enabling students to have placements with us and to then go on to have contracts with us. We invested quite a lot of time in that partnership work with the various training centres, particularly those local to us. And we further invested in our development of leadership. So again, where we've had a more junior workforce, we've had to bolster that with the leadership capability to support the more junior teams. In terms of accessibility to the service, so we talked last time about having many school nurses for every school, which has been an improvement of recent times. So every school now knows exactly who their school nurse is, and that's enabled those relationships to be developed. And also for the school nurses to get to know those school environments in a lot better detail. We've expanded existing initiatives that have been working really well. So, for example, we had a little troopers stay and play session, which was initially set up for our young parents accessing our FMP service, Family Nurse Partnership Service, which is an intensive nursing service for younger parents. That is now open to all young parents, whether or not they're accessing our service, and that's been really popular. We've been really pleased to see a number of young fathers attending as well as young mothers, which is great. Equally, our Down to Their Best service, which we've developed for young fathers, which again has been very popular. We've looked to extend the knowledge of that team, and we've been working to develop a local community of practice as well as developing our national links so that we can share learning across services. We talked specifically last time about the 2 to 2.5 year check-in health visiting, and there was a question posed around our coverage, so who the children were that we weren't reaching in that service. So over the past few months, we've done some detailed audit work, and we will continue to do that on a monthly basis to understand exactly who those children are we're not reaching. We were already above the national average when I last came, so we were 80.5%, and I'm pleased to say that in August we've reached 88.3% coverage, which is nearly 10% higher than the national average, so we'll be pleased with that. Just for context, that's around 25 children a month we're still not reaching, so it's a small number but an achievable number, so we need to do more to be able to reach those families. You'll have heard about the government's drive around the Best Start initiative, so that's very much a priority for us, and obviously this 2 to 2.5 year check again is a fundamental part of that. We've been working with our regional colleagues with this health improvement and disparities as a deep dive area for the South West, and we've identified this Swindon specifically because we've increased that coverage so greatly over the last few years. So they've set us an even more ambitious target of 90% by March next year, which we think we can achieve. Another theme with the reports area is that we're in the process of procuring the case management system, and again that will enable us to do a lot more work around accessibility, so we'll have a much clearer view of the intelligence of who is and isn't reaching our service, and we'll also be able to complete risk stratification. The final item around system impacts. So these are just some of the examples given here, but we do a lot of work with our wider partners, particularly because we're working at that universal and early intervention level. So we're often the first contact for families, so there is absolutely an opportunity for our services to identify needs very early on, and then to refer out to the system, and particularly for those nursing services. We are often a point of contact in terms of signposting and some of those specific professional referrals as well. We've very much been working to develop our integrated working and co-locations. So again, I mentioned Best Start, and that will be a big drive for us going forward. Equally, we have work to do with our wider health colleagues around Child Health Hub and integrated neighbourhood teams. So those will be themes over the next year or so. We work closely with our social care colleagues around a collective offer, so it's very much our view that we are part of a collective system in enabling support for families, and we particularly focus support on families who are reluctant to engage with some of the early help services that are delivered through social care. So some families understandably are nervous about engaging with council services where there's an attachment to children's social care, but might be more willing to engage with a health service. We do a lot of work around reduction of health inequalities, that is always a key priority for us. And again, because we have that benefit of being able to work universally, we can then look at the targeted offers available. And mental health is a particular priority for us, so we do quite a lot of work around prevention. So right at the early stages of life, looking at good attachment work, we're continually looking at practice there. We've been doing some focused work around boys' mental health. So one of our school nurses is particularly interested in that area, and she's led some system work around improving welfare for boys with mental health challenges. We also offer a range of training to partners. So, for example, around trauma-informed training, motivational interviews, some of those core skills that can support good engagement with services. So I'll stop there and very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Well, before I open the debate, I would just like to say that I understand that some turbulent times with change of staff, and it feels like you handled it really well. So I just want to thank you on behalf of the committee. And also, it's just really good to hear all these initiatives in terms of workforce, how to tackle challenges. So well done for all of that. And also on named school nurses, really good to hear about the progress. You said you're still doing analysis on children who are not receiving 2-year benefits. So good to hear that. But when you have the outcome, please share it with us. And you answered pretty much all the questions I had. Literally. So I'm going to open to the rest of the committee. Councillor Davies?
You mentioned the electronic case management system. Does that mean you don't have one at the moment, or are you getting?
We do have one, and we will be getting one. So currently we use Care Director, the same system as Children's Services, and we'll be purchasing a new system, so much like Children's Services have described. The current case management system isn't optimal in terms of our use, so we're looking to purchase a health system that specifically meets the needs of our service and can optimise things like workload, but also enable better reporting and greater intelligence.
The needs that you have, they be different to the ones that are logical.
Yes, yeah, they are. We've had 2 iterations of attempting to have both services on the same system, and there are very logical reasons as to why you would want that to work, but the realities of the work are very different. So we are looking at 2 different systems. We don't see that as a problem. So in most other areas, these health services will be delivered externally by health partners who wouldn't be on the same system anyway. What is fundamental is that the information sharing still takes place. So yes, we are mindful of those risks, but the benefits, I think, of having systems that are suitable for both services very much outweigh that.
Just on a question on the boys' mental health stuff, is that more primary or which focuses on that?
It's all age, actually, the wider team, so I can't take any responsibility, but I can talk a little bit more about this. It's looking upstream into men's mental health as well. So it all came together in a bit of a perfect storm. So the nurses were seeing frontline that they were engaging with a number of boys at school, so predominantly secondary age, who didn't want to engage with sort of traditional talking therapies, the things that are traditionally available. And then we're seeing some successes with, for example, sports-based initiatives where children can go along, take part in physical activity and have a mentor as part of that. Not for every boy, of course, but there were a lot of young men who were engaging in a very different type of offer to what was generally commissioned. So that's where it started at that end. But from our broader public health strategy perspective, obviously we have higher suicide rates in males. In the older age range, and thinking about how can you prevent that early on. So how can you improve mental health and resilience at the earliest and youngest points to try and prevent that from happening later on.
And how much, this might be straight outside your route, but how much do you engage with this sort of voluntary space in that way as well? There's things like men's shed and stuff, aren't there? Is that, yeah, because obviously there's different ways that you can put these things into place.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We're working in partnership with a whole range of organisations, voluntary sector organisations, and we would work to support to grow those as well. So you might have heard about the work with barbershops in the media relatively recently. We went viral. That's one example. Where we support community organisations to be able to do some of that work themselves.
Just to say absolutely that there is a lot of work going on in this area and very strong partnership working across the area. And I would also say that nationally this is being recognised more and more, and I believe we are looking towards a men's health strategy, much like we have women's health strategies, trying to develop that area further.
I would just say that the boys' mental health workshop, which we held, I think it's towards the end of last year now, it was standing room only. We were so overwhelmed with support from the wider community on that issue.
Well, I want to say brilliant, but it's just one of those things you wish didn't exist.
Yeah.
I just have one last one.
Yeah,
So the 25-ish, like the 2.5-year-olds, why are they not engaging? You still know. Obviously, we've stripped out a lot of the ones that are not in the area and so on. Which,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do know. So it's not 25 that aren't engaging. So in August, it was 4 families who declined the service. There's a whole range of reasons why the full cohort aren't represented. So some families will move out of area. Some it's just not the right time. A child might be in hospital, for example. We have data cleansing issues, so that's, if I'm honest, one of the reasons why there's been one of the reasons that contributed to the jump. So just making sure that our teams are completing the paperwork in time and getting it on the system. So there's a whole range of different reasons as to why that might happen. But the families who refuse to engage are very, very low. So less than 5.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Thank you for the report. I think I just want to echo what the Chair said first of all in terms of overall. I think it's a very useful report and the change in the department. Seriously well done. We know there's a lot of work still to do, but obviously it's important to recognise those positive takeaways. 2 questions, if I may. When you talk about the new programmes like the Dads at Their Best and the Family Nurse Partnership, and that's not new, but there have been changes to it. What metrics are we using? What kind of what are going to be the performance indicators as to the long-term delivery of our goals within that? Appreciate it's too early to talk about that now, but how will we measure their success, say, in a year's time or 2 years' time?
Absolutely, it's not too early to talk about it. So at the beginning of any of these initiatives, I think one of our first questions is how are we going to measure the impact of this work? So we've invested quite a lot of time and energy across the service, and again, we're looking to potentially expand this beyond the remit of the service in outcome stars. So it's a national use tool that is quite useful in terms of working with individual families to identify their own personal strengths and weaknesses. So you might look at design the particular outcomes that you want to achieve on the columns of a star. You look at measuring where you are at the beginning of an intervention and then hopefully at the end of an intervention where the scores have increased. And we can use those scores to then aggregate the data and look at what difference it's making. So there's a level of customisation. So the outcomes we use with Dads at Their Best are slightly different to the outcomes we use with young ones. And that has been informed by work with the young fathers, so they come up with their own outcomes that they specifically want to focus on. So we can look at that work. With Dads at Their Best as well, we because it was a brand new programme, we thought there was a lot of potential there. We did invest in an external evaluation from a university partner, which went really well. We've been able to publish that. Since then, the university have come back themselves and decided to do further research into the service. So we are just about to publish the second research findings on the longer term outcomes for Dads at Their Best. And again, it's looking really promising. Happy to share that once it's been published.
Is there any timescale to that? When we might expect that to come back?
It's definitely this year, but I can check the exact deadline.
Okay. That's fine. And final question, if I may. So, health disparities you touched on a few minutes ago, and it's also in the report. I was wondering if you could go into a bit more detail about how the borough actually goes about addressing these disparities across different groups. It's all whether we're talking about as a collective or a national average, but we know it cuts across genders, different races, even experiences within different multi-academy trusts and different schools. They take it more seriously to set differing degrees. So, how do we go about addressing that?
Yeah, so it's a very big question, and there would be a very big answer suggesting, there could potentially be a separate report around that. I don't know if Emily, you want to answer first from a strategic perspective.
Yeah, from a perspective. So So I was here last week for the Swindon Policy Performance Committee, where we talked about our approach around reducing health inequalities and addressing the wider determinants of health and all of the different influences on people's health. So absolutely, we have a commitment to working to better understand that across all of our services that we are currently commissioning, but also the practices that we have as a council. And that is one of the focuses of the Fair Assessment Mission and the Policy Committee. So in terms of the strategic approach, much like the other work we've discussed this evening, this is absolutely a partnership endeavour. Some of these inequalities are very entrenched, and we know that we have significant pockets of deprivation in Swindon and inequalities across different inclusion health groups and different ethnic minority communities and diversity that we see in Swindon. So I think the steps are us having a really good collective understanding of what those inequalities look like, thinking about how we embed that understanding into all of the work that we do as a council, thinking about how that informs where we put our services, thinking about that prevention work that we're trying to work towards, that is universal, because we need to prevent ill health for everyone, but we need to have then that targeted approach. And so particularly the approach that I think we should be looking at is focusing in on our most deprived areas first, because we know that that usually intersects with other reasons why people may be experiencing health inequalities. So that's the strategic overview, but lots of detailed work to go underneath that. And we have set up some structures around that at the moment. But then when it comes to specific services, they will have their own plans in place.
Thank you a lot for that answer. I appreciate it is a really broad question, huge topic. I guess if I were to file it down slightly and slightly refine the question then, have you identified any specific groups or any specific strategies on top of what you've outlined in the report that you would plan to introduce within the next few months? Taking the schools as an example, you work with education colleagues at this point to address those differences across different multi-academy trusts, and if so, when will we expect to see that programme or that brought forward?
I believe that Kirsten was to call.
I do, actually, it was responding to your earlier question. I think it was a really good question, but expanding that question in relation to outcomes, because what is really important is when we find something that works for a particular cohort, whether it's a cohort of young people, older people, and one of the things that we are really committed to is how do we then embed that in business as usual practice. So how do we work with that multi-academy trust? How do we work with that school? How do we work with that voluntary sector partner so that it becomes embedded within the system? And what we can't do is do lots of different things all at once, because one of my issues is you get initiative overload. What we've got to do is find the things that work and work for particular groups of people and then embed them in practice and not have them as just future initiatives that we roll out and we don't actually embed. So I think your point is absolutely the accurate one, which is how do we identify what those issues are that we're trying to address within different, whether they're community geographies, whether they're age groups, and then once we've determined what works well, how do we then roll that out to different groups, trial what works, and then embed it in practice. So I think we've absolutely, it is one of the conundrums that we've got in terms of the future operating model, the partnership model, the prevention approach, but also how do we address inequalities within the Fair Swindon mission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I found it really interesting to read. I mean, with community, early intervention, children's health as key priorities, it's heartening to read the positive progress that's in this report. And I think when I read about workforce development, I think a lot of this is predicated on the fact that we have been doing a lot of work with the workforce to get these measurable improvements. And I know that you've got increased staff retention and a higher coverage of contacts, etc. So I think we have learned a lesson here, which is really good news. And I feel very comfortable with the information that's been put in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Just following on what you just said, obviously we had two contrasts tonight, when we have public health cracking the problems, getting on with the workforce, doing new initiatives, and then we have different things where there's still ongoing changes and struggles. Are there any meetings where you share these lessons learned and learning between each other? Because it just feels like complete opposite under here. It's just, yeah, it's just so fascinating.
Yeah, I think what I would say is this has not been a quick fix. There's been many, many years of work that's gone into turning this around. So it's not something that's happened overnight. It's not something I've been taking credit for because it predates my time, but I will pass the feedback back to the team. But yes, we have recognised that we have learned some lessons on the way. There are also things we've tried that haven't worked, the detail of which isn't in the report. So I think there is some learning that we can share with our children's services colleagues. Some is applicable, some not so, because they are different services, but there are some overlaps. We're putting together some information around that at the moment. So we also have a meeting in the diary with our legal services colleagues who also experience similar challenges around the workforce. So where we tested what can work, acknowledging some things are different depending on the service area. There is some learning, we're really keen to support wider areas of the council.
Thank you. I just really hope that under the new operating model there won't be any siloed approach.
So I'll come back on that really directly. The intention of the new operating model is that public health provide the foundation for the whole of the operating model. So the insight is captured there, the insight in our, even at a macro community point is then shared and circulated. It was public health that have worked with a number of areas around the joint strategic needs analysis that then work at that, are then informing the practice that is happening. So it is beginning to develop, and as Carolyn's just said, she's worked very, very closely with children's services, and the development of the strategic needs analysis for children and young people has absolutely been a collective effort. And I think we've become much more joined up recently than we ever have been before, based on the history that's been shared with me. So there is something around how we absolutely capture public health as being more than just one entity, one service, but actually serving a foundation.
Thank you. Councillor Crowley.
Just two things. I think the work is talking amazing kind of gold standard service, and it's really impressive. I just wondered, it's great you're coming forward, but is there a sense of whether you're kind of a culturally reflexive service, and is that informing some practice, kind of pivoting from what Councillor Chandler was saying, and those communities who are quite marginalised, who might struggle with outreach and engagement? Is there a sense of embedding that in kind of systems and practices across what we're delivering?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think there are absolutely areas of excellence in the service. There's still areas for improvement. So I think we talked about the last meeting, for example, we're doing some focused work at the moment around our school nursing offer and trying to understand why some of our minority ethnic communities are not represented within our referrals there. So I wouldn't want to give the impression everything is perfect, but yes, there are some areas of excellence. Sorry, I've got lost the track of it. What was this one?
I was just wondering if you were kind of embedding culturally informed, culturally reflective practices within the training and the offer of the service.
I think that's an area that we're developing ourselves. So we have an excellent clinical lead who has worked in some very diverse areas, and she's been able to bring that expertise into the service and say, actually, we need to do better in this area. We have been able to work with some community groups who come in and deliver some training directly to our staff around cultural competence. But I think it's something that we need to continually work on. It's not we'll do some training and that's fixed. So I would say that's an area that we need to continually work to improve and develop.
And the second one was around, in terms of, it's great that school nurses are kind of skilled up in mental health and delivering mindfulness and what sounds like quite low level interventions. Do they this probably, I think I know the answer to this question already, but I'll ask it anyway. Do they have a sense of when the threshold is outside of their remit work and when to refer them to CAMS? Are there any risks that have been identified in terms of them potentially holding young people for too long within their own kind of caseload? Is there any kind of blockage to combat on the referral pathway when needed?
I can confidently say no. So what usually happens is a child is already on a waiting list by the tier 2 or tier 3 services, and the school nursing service is often then left to hold that caseload while they're waiting. So sometimes it will just be a check-in, sometimes it will be a time-limited piece of work, and we have seen cases that then come off waiting lists as a result. But no, they wouldn't. They're very aware of the limitations of what they can offer, and we've developed things over the past year, for example, the self-harm pathway, where we're very clear, because that was an area that certain nurses were feeling a bit uncomfortable about, and we're unsure as to what their thresholds were. So we've standardised practice to ensure that there is clear documentation and boundaries around what they offer and when we need to refer them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Without wishing to extend the loving, but this seems to me to be a perfect example of how Scrutiny should work. We came in April, we put our report down, you said we need this, and this, and now we come back and clearly we've delivered on this, and this, and that's the purpose. That is the purpose, in my view, of Scrutiny, and you have, so it's hats off all round, in my view, and. Just a big up for public health. We're quite happy to come to any scrutiny meeting if what you might want. I'm often accused of dumping the public health into these sorts of things. So I'm going to mention it again. If you want to really know what the way forward within public health and indeed the broader strategic council. Get her to give you a briefing on something called Core 20+5, which is Councillor Elliott has not suffered as been enlightened because of it of the fellow Swindon, but that really is the direction of travel we're going to do. It's about 2020 Core 20+5 is about doing deep dives in health areas in the 20 most deprived areas of Swindon, and from that, as Kirsten said, we can develop programs and systems which we can develop further. But that I don't know if anyone wants to say something further on Core 20, but that is really the way you're going to.
Thank you. I would say yes, absolutely, very happy, and I think we have discussed previously the forward plan, and we do have something in later in the year, don't we, about health inequalities. So absolutely happy for that, or happy for that to come sooner. I was going to say that I'm also coming back, I think, in December to talk about how we're allocating resource. So
it might be more difficult.
Some of that conversation as well. But the other thing, sorry, just remembered that I was going to say is also then how all of that inequalities agenda fits with the new conversations across health and social care about neighbourhood health and how we are bringing health down to that local level and making sure that we are tailoring health and care offer to the needs of that local area.
Thank you very much for your offer. The only thing I would say, I would not want to duplicate with the fair Swindon committee, so I'll just double check with them. We have items in the forward plan. The next time we're going to see in December, which is probably going to be a bit more challenging to get to. But we are looking forward to that. So I'm going to close this item. Thank you very much. It was a really good discussion. And please keep us posted on the outcome on the 20% of children and will have received the 2-year visits. Because that's the outstanding.
Oh, sorry, let me pop it back on. I was probably talking too quickly at the beginning, but
It's work in progress.
It wasn't in the report, so I brought a verbal update just to update you today. So this is hot off the press. So for the August reviews, we were up to 88.3%. So that's following those individual monthly audits and looking at those ranges of issues that we've identified. So we are now nearly 10% ahead of the national average, and as I say, we're aiming for 90% coverage by March.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome to stay or you can leave.
This is a work programme.
Are you saying okay?
No.
So thank you. So we're gonna move to work program discussion. Again, just to sense check the items that are coming up for October, which is heavily focused on human services and health services. And then December will be budget proposals, which will be more challenging discussions instead. I'm so happy to take any comments, feedback on the work program. Councillor, yeah.
I just want to chair whether we've got 3 items waiting to be allocated: right care, right vehicle, Swindon's SEND, and education attainment. And I wondered if we had any thoughts about whether we might slot those in. We wish to.
So with the attainment, I'm just gonna cross-check with the person in committee again, just to avoid any sort of duplication. Because you mentioned earlier they're doing work on this item. Right here, right person.
Sorry, I can answer that actually, because we discussed it at the last fair board, so they're looking specifically at inequalities within educational attainment and progress. So they're going to be looking at distinct groups within that. So if what you're talking about is a generic education report that gives our attainment and progress outcomes for people, that's obviously what would be the standard, but we don't get the validated results until February. So the reality of that is, whilst we have invalidated information at the moment, what we don't have is that validated data, because we don't get that nationally validated until then. So if that is what you want, better push back till after February.
So again, we'll be guided by you. If that's the case, it will might be moved to the next municipal year, if that's the case. With right care, right person, this one is dependent on the ICB. So as soon as they have the data, then they can come present to us, but we haven't had any update. And then send provision, again, we were just waiting on the outcome of the EACP audit. So that's why these 2 items haven't been allocated, because they are time dependent on others. Councillor Dixon, you wanted to go in?
No, I was just going to ask about the ICB and that you've identified who's coming to the meeting and that they're HCRG representatives.
Is this the item for
October? Okay. You're dealing with it anyway, that's fine.
Yeah, community services were in discussions. Around the time frames, because it was one item that we had to push out. So we are working with them, and if there are any challenges for them bringing the item, we would just have to adjust as we need to. Any other comments?
Just to say that the right care, right person is led by Wiltshire Police more than ICB. Would you agree? So it might be that is something that it might be that I can provide you with contact with Wiltshire Police rather than ICB.
Because this is a follow-up, so they already came to this meeting twice.
Yeah.
And this was just we asked specific set of questions to Gordon, so he presented and he took it away. This is different data in hand. So that's why it's still on the forward. But I agree, it's a collaboration between police and ICB, but ICB have been coming to this meeting. Fine. Okay, good. And the last item we have status on actions. Are there any questions? No? Good. Then we can close the meeting. Councillor Dixon?
I think there's one outstanding item, isn't there, that you need to complain. Not completed. Provide a written response with a breakdown of data of the number of children and people experiencing homelessness that are care experienced. So we probably need to provide that, don't we?
No.
Yeah. So we've got a minute.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to close the meeting. So thank you very much for your attendance and contribution tonight. I'm looking forward